Good afternoon. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Happy New Year to everybody. You know, I thought Dean did a fabulous job as the chair before, but I'm learning to expect even more from you now. There was electronic signage coming in. We had beef Wellington for lunch. That was very, very nice.
Like that?
Yeah.
Many more to come.
Many more to come. Well, fabulous. Move this way. I'd like to call the meeting of the Facilities Committee to order. Minoka, would you please call the roll?
Chair Huizinga,
Present.
Vice Chair Beard, Governor Carter,
Here.
Governor Chopra,
Here.
Chair Hosseini,
Here.
Governor Levine, Governor Link. Here. Governor Morton. Here. Chair Huizinga, you have a quorum.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Chair Hosseini for appointing me as the chair, for having trust in me and the Facilities Committee, and welcome him as well as he joins us as a member of our committee. I'm committed to the important work that we must accomplish during the term, and know that each of you are equally willing to join and help us to solve the task of funding for our university system. Second, I'm counting on the fact that Dick Beard is staying on as vice chair. Thank you, Dick. And I hope to be the leader that you were, looking for your counsel, as well as taking control of chair of the Legislative Committee. And I'm counting on that the both of us, you will keep me out of trouble as we are walking the halls of the Capitol during the upcoming legislative session, working to meet the space needs of the university. With that said, the first order of business is to approve the minutes of our September 12th meeting. Are there any changes to the minutes?
I move approval.
So moved. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so moved. Chris tells me the plan is to have both the October workshops minutes and today's meeting minutes completed by our next meeting, and then we'll be caught up. And thank you, Chris. We have two big items on today's agenda, but first, Chris has a couple of presentations to make. Both of these are informal items and are made on an annual basis. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is our completed projects presentation. We instituted this several years ago. So often, especially with this committee and the budget committee, you'll see the list of projects and you'll see all the funding requests and the bond request as well, but never really get a sense, unlike the University Board of Trustees, where you can, sort of put your hands on the projects when they're completed. This board doesn't have that opportunity. So this is just a snapshot of all the major projects, and I won't take too much time. I have a few facts on some of the selected projects. If any given board member wants to know more information about the funding or about the purpose of the facility, I'll be glad to try to address that. And of course, we do have some university representatives here as well, but we can get back to you. One thing we noticed in going through this, we're going to start with state-funded facilities, meaning state-appropriated projects, and then we'll do the bonded projects. We had missed a couple of projects, and we do a reconciliation. So for the record, I'm just going to cover those briefly. That's going to be the first couple of slides, and then we'll start from the lowest dollar to the highest dollar projects. So the first this is at University of Florida. This was an expansion of their journalism and communication school. It was just basically a minor addition to an existing facility from PICO funds. The IFAS Professional Development Center, for $5 million. This gives IFAS a place to have conferences, to have training for the ag experts in our state. I think sometimes this was primarily funded, it says university funds. There were significant donations to this project to make this happen. And let me ask, my voice is going in and out. Is that better? Is it too loud? It's good. It's fine? Okay, great. The P.K. Young School, we have, if I have it correctly, 5 universities operate developmental research schools through their departments, through their colleges of education. These facilities some are historic, but many have been funded over the years through PICO. They're considered school districts, but they're independent school districts. They're not part of the county school board's administration, and they're relatively autonomous, but they do report to the universities. This is a K through 5 facility that replaces a lot of older facilities that by DOE's records, these were not good educational facilities, very poor condition. PK Young is looking to build a 6 through 12 classroom, again, to replace some facilities that are in very poor repair as well. But this is a very good facility for the DRS at UF. And then lastly, in terms of catching up, for the record, the Vet Education and Clinical Research Center at UF. This is the largest college of veterinary medicine in the state, and they're very well served by this new facility. Okay, so now we start with the first project for 2013. We start at $3.1 million. This is a tropical research facility. It seems like we're all UF today, but not. We're going to have some other universities. UF is the only state university research center in the continental U.S. that focuses on tropical and subtropical crops. And we all know how important that is to the state of Florida, and this is a new facility for that IFAS program. Florida State, we'll be later talking about the budget, about renovation, remodel. This is one of the older buildings on campus, the Epps building, and this was a renovation of about 26,000 square feet of this building that currently houses the College of Criminology and Criminal Justice. And one thing I'm not pointing out, but you can see that we are also highlighting the LEED and green features of each of these buildings. As we renovate, as we build new, the universities are doing everything they can to put in features that will provide long-term cost savings and as well as be environmentally sustainable. The satellite chiller plant. This is a utility infrastructure project at FIU. This is really a good project. I want to pause for a second. Almost all our campuses run on chilled water, which by its nature is, I'd argue, the most efficient way to deliver cooling to a campus, whether it's an office park or whether it's a college campus, as opposed to, the typical, like a home, central heating and air. What this does, this is an expansion of FIU's chiller plant, but this is going to allow them to build their medical school out. When we were at FIU a few months ago, I think you saw a lot of new construction. I believe it's sort of in the northeast quadrant of the campus. That's where their College of Medicine is going to be located. But of course, it's not just the College of Medicine. It's all the associated research that's going to go there. In order to support that, they really need to expand their chilled water capacity. So this is the type of bread and butter facility that supports something that the board and the state committed to several years ago when it authorized FIU's College of Medicine. So this is part of where facilities, sometimes we sort of lead where we're building the building for something that's new. Sometimes we're adding additional space or even additional capacity to support the things that we already have well underway. But this is very much a critical project for FIU. And you'll see this actually has room for 3 units. There's space, it has room for 5, it has 3 in it. So they'll be coming back in a few more years asking for another 2 units to add even more chilled water capacity as they add buildings in that quadrant of the campus. UF, this is a data center that they built with university funds, ultimately state funds, that consolidate a lot of data processing functions across campus. It's not on the main campus, it's located off campus on their east campus. UCF, this is one of the last large PICO projects that were funded from the good years, and in fact UCF actually redirected funding from another project to finish. This is just a general purpose classroom building. And it also houses the ROTC program at UCF. And we'll be able to see that when we have our meeting, I think, in the next couple of months at UCF. Florida State, the Johnston Building Annex. This was from PICO and private donations. This is really a combination academic building. It houses Florida State's Honors College and also houses some dining space. But the dining space, if I understand it correctly, that was funded in large part from a vendor. So this is where the university is doing basically a public-private partnership. And of course, we're all well aware of Florida State's goal to become preeminent. Part of that does involve getting their honors college, honors school, and housing it in a more central location so they can sort of show it off to the students they were trying to recruit, where before it didn't have an identified home, certainly nothing of this caliber. And as we move up in costs, $54 million is again University of Florida. This is their research and academic center at Lake Nona. This was funded from PICO, and this complements the other programs. This is primarily for their College of Pharmacy, but is also medicine. Of course, it's co-located with University of Central Florida campus at Lake Nona, as well as the teaching hospitals that are located there. FIU, $57 million, Classroom Academic Health Center. This is one of the projects that is going in that same quadrant where the satellite chiller plant is going. Okay, so that was the last of the state-funded projects, and I'll have a summary at the end. Bonded, we have, this is a very minor project, $5 million. UCF renovated some Greek housing. Typically, our universities are not in the Greek housing business, but this is one for a variety of circumstances. It made sense for universities to step in, renovate the facility, then rent it back out to Greek housing, and it helps their overall housing system. Another UCF, a parking garage. We've got a lot of parking garages, and you may recall we've approved a lot of parking garages. As we continue to go, parking garage 3 at FAU, $13 million. Florida State, the indoor practice facility, $14.5 million. That was approved by this board. Of course, the school expects and has received significant contributions and donations towards the ultimate paying off those bonds. But to have that initial funds to get the thing built, that's one of the great beauties of bonds. You get all the money up front so you can build it right away and not have to wait 2 to 3, 4 years till you accrue enough funds to move forward. So this is a very good facility for Florida State University. Of course, everyone will want one now. UCF, Academic Villages, housing for UCF, again built with bonds. And FAU, Parliament Hall. And I think the interesting fact here is why it's called Parliament Hall, which our former Chief of Staff, Randy, told me. It's like, well, you have like a gaggle of geese. You have a parliament of owls, which is, of course, the FAU mascot. So I thought, well, that's altogether too clever for me. But I'm like, I can show off saying, well, I know what that is. UF, again, their Institute on Aging Research, clinical and translational research. This was partly built with bonds and partly built with a federal grant, and this is doing amazing things, working, it's very closely located next door to Shands. I think this building is going to do so much. It just opened this year, of course. This building is going to do great things for the state. And this is, I believe, the most expensive bonded project, Parkview Housing at FIU. It's not just housing. They've been able to incorporate some student learning spaces, a conference room that's available to general university functions, on a secondary basis, if it's not needed by housing, and as well as some just fabulous spaces within the building. And it's located directly across from their football stadium. So it's a great location. It's been very well done. FIU really timed this very well, where they got the best, I feel, of very good market conditions. I don't believe, I've talked to Dr. Jessel, their CFO, they cannot build this building today at today's prices. So it's just really great. This is a great facility for FIU. So in summary, we've had a total funding of $346 million. As you saw, much of that did come from bonds. Some of that's donations. Some of that's private funds and grants. We added 2 million square feet. That's 16 projects completed. That compares to the 22 completed in the previous year. About half state, half bonds. I think the thing to take into account is we are still coming off of some of the good funding years from the state had in 08 and 09. We'll talk further in our committee about the budget, but we're not going to see, 6, 7, 8 major state-funded projects. And, when we start to see, even if, shouldn't say even if, when we get the additional funding for the university system to do maintenance and to finish some of the projects that have been partially funded, we still are going to see a lull. because it takes a year at least of planning. A lot of these projects take 2 years of construction because they're very large facilities, as you saw from the square footage numbers, and they're very complicated buildings. We're going to talk about research buildings. So no matter what happens, we're going to see a lull in university construction, and so that's it for the completed projects presentation. I'd be glad to take any questions.
No questions? If not, the next item that Chris is going to present on is on energy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a little shorter presentation. Again, this is one we've been doing a few years. The legislature originally requested the board to present this information. That section of law has expired, but the board has continued to request that we do this. So the good news here on this slide, our baseline is 0708. This is total utility costs for all space types. The universities, their controllers take their monthly utility statements and they consolidate them and they give us the totals month by month. This is energy cost only, not water, not waste management, energy use, and some, gas, anything used to create electricity or heating or cooling. Our base year, we were at $149 million. We are down to $132 million, so that's 11% increase. So that's right off the bat, that's some pretty good news. When you consider that we've added 11% more space, the fact that we've been able to decrease costs by 11% is really a testament that our universities are making very good decisions. They're building buildings that are more energy efficient. They're taking offline or demolishing facilities that are not energy efficient. Now, some of this is the reduction in cost of electricity that everyone has seen in their bills. But really a lot of this, I believe, is the better building standards and better building codes that we're using. And this just sort of gives you a snapshot of how much each school, every school has shown an increase in square footage, except for FAMU, which showed a slight decrease. Everyone else is growing. Next year we'll be able to add Florida Polytechnic to this slide, and they'll be right there at the end, past New College. Energy consumption is up. Energy consumption on a KBTU basis is up 6%. We added 11%, so that's to be expected. But overall, our KBTU use per square footage is down 7%. So we're becoming more efficient. I think this is very good. This is very high level. Each of our large universities they're very active in this space. They're doing things such as, let me have a note here. Florida State, they look at projects. If they can put $1 million in, they're looking at what has a 7-year payback, and they look at doing things like improving the controls. They're looking at motors. They're looking at anything they can do to say, how can we save money, not just for 1 year, but for 7, 10, 15 years. And of course, this board in the debt guidelines allows universities to encourage them to enter into the energy savings contracts. So this is a great space where by building, better facilities and improving what we have, we can save considerable dollars in the long run for the system. And with that, that's that presentation. I'd be glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Great job, and we'll continue to push. It's only going to get more and more expensive to heat and cool and electrify our schools, but it's encouraging to see where we've been. The next item is our first action item. It has not been the board's practice to validate the educational plant survey. However, the board is charged statutorily with this responsibility, and I feel it is important for the committee to review the information contained in the plant survey for each school. The universities are on a 5-year staggered schedule, so it will be typically we'll be approving 2 to 3 surveys each year. Chris has already presented this, so do I have a motion for the validation of the Florida Gulf Coast University Educational Plant Survey?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Okay, the last item on today's agenda is the amending of the LBR of our legislative budget request. The information put before you today is a result of several factors, including the information presented at the October workshop, new PICO revenue estimates, and individual discussions. Chris has had with the new Chancellor, Board Chair and Vice Chair, and Committee Chair and Vice Chair. I would like Chris to walk us through each of these changes, and then we can take questions on any part of the presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This information is found at the very back of your facilities package. It is, and what I'm going to be going to is the set of documents referred to as Attachment 1. It's basically a color-coded set of slides. We don't have it up on the screen, but it is in your packet, and I know it's on the web as well for those who are following with this. So first, item A. Item A is the critical deferred maintenance and the statutory renovation repair maintenance money. The board had previously requested a total amount of $96 million. The State Revenue Estimating Conference for PICO met in December and lowered the estimate. And so this is one of those, as far as the PICO funds, the board had requested that 100% of PICO funds be directed towards maintenance, the statutory portion, and then put the rest into a pot of critical deferred maintenance, that the projects that have been identified for the universities that are most critical. So in this case, the $87 million, it matches the allocation provided to us from the Department of Education. We have to match that by law. I think the thing I want to point out, that's the request. I want to make sure the committee is aware. The PICO conference dropped the estimates for all remaining years. We actually, at the point in time when we last looked at that, the official estimate of the state was that bonding capacity would come back in 16, 17. So we started to see a little bit of a recovery. That recovery was apparently not real. We now see no bonding capacity returning in PICO for, the conference goes out 10 years, and it shows no bonding capacity coming back. So that's pretty staggering. Even when we've spoken about PICO many times in the past, and even when the task force looked at PICO, there was an expectation that would come back in a few years, that this was just perhaps a temporary funding lull. Apparently, it's not temporary. PICO is, as far as a major revenue source, is, per the official state estimates, it's basically gone. The little bit that's remaining, which is certainly very helpful, it needs to all go to maintenance. That's what this board has recommended. So that's what this recommendation is, the $87 million. The next set of, so that's in orange. The next priority, it's listed and identified in your packet as priority B projects, and I'll take these. These are the projects that for the most part we covered at our workshop, and these are the projects that have been previously funded by the legislature but that are partially funded. So to finish the project, to complete the project, to complete what's been authorized in the past, additional funding is necessary. And that's what these projects are. I know I've done briefings, I believe, with most of the members. So at the pleasure of the committee, and the pleasure of the chair, I can walk through this list of named projects, or I can just take specific questions about any of the projects in priority B projects. And I could offer the same thing for the priority C projects, which are the renovation projects. So maybe I should pause and just see if there are questions before I spend 20 minutes talking about each and every project individually. I know we had a 4-hour workshop on these.
Right. Is this list the same as the workshop, or did it get modified a little bit between now and then? I thought it was modified a little bit.
It has been modified, and let me go to my notes. Maybe I can walk through the changes from the September list, that if that's fine. Okay. So starting with the first project, chemical biology, that project remains the same. Earth, Ocean, Atmospheric Sciences Building, that remains the same. The UCF Engineering Building Project, that's the same. FAMU FSU College in Engineering, we now have that at $15 million and $15 million. That's an increase over what was previously recommended at our September board meeting. I think the Dean of the College of Engineering, it's a joint use facility. The Dean explained why the funding was so badly needed at that facility. to renovate and to somewhat expand that program. So this is a project, it's listed under a joint FAMU-FSU line. It is jointly administered. How the legislature appropriates the funds ultimately will dictate, which of the two institutions constructs the new facility or handles the renovation. So ultimately, on a joint use project, that's a legislative decision. This is just a funding request for the project. FAU Scripps project, that is down $2 million. That is the 14-15 funding for that project for FAU Scripps. That's an existing facility. The FIO research vessel, this is a new project. It was not on our list. This is one that came at the very end of a workshop. I know several of the board members have expressed individual support to me for this project. It's new, but it replaces the existing Bellows research vessel, which is really in very, very poor condition. Our system architect has seen the vessel. It really is not one that we want to keep in service. To keep it in service is just going to cost more and more funds to keep it operational. So it is on this list. It's unique because it's a vessel. So is it a renovation? Is it new? What is it? We don't know. The legislature, when it funded the previous research vessel, the Weatherbird, funded it in this location. It said it's capital outlay. Even though it's not a building, it's a major piece of equipment, as it were. This is where equipment goes. As best we know, this is where it should be as a request, as opposed to being a request in our operating budget, because it's a long-term asset.
That's a system-wide facility, basically.
It is a system-wide facility. It's administratively housed under USF, but the FIO is one of our handful of statewide ASIOs, which I don't remember what that stands for, but they're our statewide centers. The Heart Health Institute at USF, that is the same, I believe. iHub has been added to this list at $7.6 million to complete the project. There was originally concerns that because of the veto, should it be on the list or not. Those appear to have been worked out, those concerns, and so now it is on the list with the other continuation projects. Gulf Coast continues to emphasize that that is their priority for funding and feels confident that's the project that they most want to be on the Board of Governors list. The USF Interdisciplinary Science Building, that is unchanged. The Math and Physics Building renovation at UCF is the same. UNF, they had previously requested land acquisition in the amount of $18 million. This is now $9 million for renovation of Skinner Jones Hall. And again, this is a continuation project, and I think the end of the day, it had a higher priority. The renovation had a higher priority where the board was going than a new land acquisition type project. So in talking with the university, they decided this is where they want funding. It'd be better to have $9 million, a better chance of getting the $9 million for a project such as this than $18 million for a land acquisition. Hope I said that correctly. FIU, that project, Student Academic Support Center, is the same. The SUS Joint Use Library Storage Facility, that's actually about a $2 million increase. I was able to tour the facility thanks to the head of UF Libraries, and that needs some additional funding and to be able to do what they want, which is to finish conversion of a former Florida DOT warehouse into a state-of-the-art, long-term, very long-term primarily book depository. So that's a slight increase there. And then lastly is the St. Pete College of Business at $19 million. And I think, and we've added under that's it for the first three colors, priorities A, B, and C. So are there any questions about any of those facilities, or I'll proceed if that's okay.
You said, I thought you said was taken down $2 million. Did I understand that correctly?
Correct. It was originally we had it on our list as a $4 million request, but what I failed to realize was that was actually 1 year of catch-up, which is the 13-14 year, which is the year we're in, plus the 14-15 year. So in effect, FAU we've already missed the window for the legislature to finish funding that project. So we're requesting the 14-15 year of funding, which is actually owed to Palm Beach County, as opposed to $2 million, another $2 million just to reimburse FAU for costs they've already incurred. So we're trying to keep this list, sort of make that fine distinction there.
Mr. Chairman? Question? Ask a question?
Yes.
With the library storage facility, have we rethought any of that, knowing that we're going to be going dramatically forward with the Florida virtual campus idea? Are they going to find conflict eventually down the road?
I'm not an expert on it, but I would say no. The real purpose of this storage facility is they are digitizing copies of, everything in the university collection that goes to the storage facility. So to the extent possible or allowed by copyright, they're doing digitization. But as I understand it, the ability to use those resources is predicated in many cases on having at least one hard copy original that you can put your hands on and say, I own a copy. So therefore sharing it with the 300,000 students plus of the state university system is legally possible just by having that one physical copy. Versus if we did not retain that one physical copy, copyright would prohibit us from distributing it electronically. So this is somewhat of a storage issue, but it's also somewhat, we're protecting ourselves under fair use law. And I'm way out of my depth on this. I'm just sort of repeating what I've been told about the project.
Mr. Chairman. Chris, help me understand, is this going to be treated as lump sum, or is it going to be a line item based kind of a funding? Are they going to look at project by project, or is there a percentage of this funded and then we have to decide which ones to?
Of the priority, what is contemplated is that priority B and priority C and D as well, which we haven't covered yet, will be funded as named projects by the legislature, as they have always historically done. Mm-hmm. So the legislature would fund the projects, hopefully as all the projects recommended by the board, but these would be named projects. That's how it's historically operated. With regards to the maintenance, the renovation, repair, remodeling line at $27 million is distributed by a statutory formula, so it's a lump sum, but the board has no discretion how the lump sum's allocated. It's a formula. We are asking on the $60 million for critical deferred that be given to the board in a lump sum fashion, so the board could, we develop appropriate measures, metrics, but with the idea that we could go at the most critical deferred maintenance projects. And the idea there is that a funding formula in critical maintenance may not go hand in hand, because the school that has the worst maintenance issues may not be the school that it may not be possible to apply some ratio or formula to it. We may have to, what we have literally right now is a list of hundreds and hundreds of individual named projects. And the thought is that I would work with our CFO, Tim Jones, and we'd work with the CFOs. We discussed this at a meeting they had following our board meeting in November, as to, what if we received a lump sum for critical deferred maintenance, how would it be distributed? What type of accountability? How do we know that it's going towards, fixing roofs and not like recarpeting? That we're fixing the most critical projects in our system. And so hopefully that answers your question.
Yes.
I have a similar question, but it is more procedural than it is with any specific item. In the past, as somewhat of a new kid on the block, do we participate as a member of Board of Governors in workshop sessions so that we participate in the prioritization of these projects? Or is it traditional to prepare this list and just present it to the Board of Governors?
Traditionally, and of course, this is an opportune time to look at anything that's been the way we've done things historically, with a new chancellor, a new chair, a new vice chair, and in many respects, a new board. The prioritization has been handled primarily at the level of the chancellor and the chair of the committee, ultimately by the chair of the Board of Governors. It in many ways mirrors how the legislature handles capital projects, where capital projects ultimately are decided by the Senate President and the Speaker of the House, with the budget chairs weighing in on what ultimately gets decided. So it's been handled at a very high level, and it hasn't gone through a committee, through a committee process on the legislative side. On our side, the list is prioritized, it's presented to the board, it's debated to a greater or lesser extent, and then that becomes the Board of Governors list. Of course, any board member can speak up, and of course, I know from past experience, for the 6 years I've been here, individual board members do call me, and individual presidents do call me, and that has in the past certainly swayed my position and certainly swayed previous chairs, previous chancellors when they make an argument for different projects. So that's how it's worked historically. How it will work on forward is really up to this committee and up to the board chair and chancellor.
Any other questions?
Well, I will finish up covering what's in the package, and priority D is in yellow. That is the new projects. There's a handful of new projects. These are Heiser Sciences for New College, UCF's Interdisciplinary Research and Incubator, the satellite chiller expansion. I briefly alluded to that when I was talking about completed projects. That completes that project in terms of adding 2 units, and the strategic land acquisition for FIU. That's the funding request. I'll go, and then attachment 2 was just a further breakout of the statutory renovation remodeling. That's attachment 2, so I think we can dispense with that. And lastly is attachment 5. These are the projects which will be funded from non-state sources. The first project for reference is UF, Dasburg President's House, so make sure you're on the right place. These are projects that are not going to be funded from state funds, but they'll be funded from private sources, donations, grants, etc. But when constructed, there'll be educational facilities, and the university needs legislative authority to construct. If they're constructed, if the funds are raised, if they happen, the universities can then come back to the board's budget committee and ask for funds basically for utility cost and for maintenance cost, custodial type maintenance cost to operate the facilities. So this is just permission for them to ask legislative permission to build these facilities. So there's no dollars associated with this request in attachment 5. And that is the materials that are in the packet.
There are no dollars associated with this, with these projects, as I understand it, as you just laid out. But in the future years, if these projects are to be replaced, where does that money come from? And where does the money come from annually to maintain these?
Governor Moore, and let me address that question if I could. What happens is we have a 2-step process. This is step 1. This is permission to construct these facilities. If the facility is constructed, the university can come back to the board's budget committee for the first step and say, we would request the following amount for utilities and the following amount for maintenance. The budget office has a form that says, what class of building it is, how much square footage, how much of the space in the building is dedicated for E&G activities, and there's a formula that says, for this type and this size of a building, here's how much funding will be requested. And that request will come to the board, and the board can vote it up or down. Now, historically, the board has always approved these O&M requests, and historically, the legislature has always funded the PO&M request. I think the theory being that here's a building, it's space, it can be used for an educational purpose, and the state didn't have to fund the construction. The state just had to fund the operational cost. If the state had funded the building from its own budget, it automatically funds the O&M cost. So does that answer your question, Governor Morton?
No.
Oh, well, let me try. Yeah,
My
if
question
you don't
was-
mind, we could try again.
I understand the process you just went through. Really, the essence of the question is, when you take a look at the nature of these projects, they're probably projects that might not ordinarily get in front of the legislature and taxpayer money be devoted to. But my real question is, once these buildings are constructed, they become part of, integrated into the, if you will, culture of the campus and become part of the essence of the university. And I would suspect down the road that depreciation and the use of the buildings would, and/or facilities, would require that they make a decision as respects replacing them. My question was, when these buildings, if they have to be replaced, where do those funds come from?
Okay, so in the long run, once these buildings become part of the educational inventory, they become eligible for that statutory funding formula, the one we talked about, where now our recommendation is $28 million from PICO. So these added to that pool, and by formula, based on the age and the square footage of those facilities, they'll receive, the university will receive a lump sum amount for maintenance. And then the university can decide, oh, here's our lump sum fund for maintenance, long-term type maintenance, and they can use those dollars to keep the building maintained. Of course, one of the problems has been that pot of money is so small, it goes it's spread very, very thin. So that is a long-term. In the long term, if the building is built with private funds and it needs to be replaced in 40, 50, however many years, it's in the same position as any other university facility. Either the state provides the funding, or there's private money, or if at some point the condition becomes so bad it can't be operated, it can request the chancellor to provide a survey approval for demolition. And we have buildings demolished every year. Some, they're just at the end of their life and need to be demolished. Others, maybe they could have gone a little longer, but, that's what it is.
Yeah, I just wanted to get, there's no such thing as a free lunch. I mean, these things eventually will wind up finding their way into the budget. And granted, there's a lot of very interesting things here, but it's like someone akin to someone giving me a free baby and me having the responsibility of raising that child for the next 21 years. So there are costs associated with these kinds of things that are borne by the taxpayers.
Noted. Any other questions, observations? Governor Fossey?
More just an observation. I think it'd be important to know first where the revenue is coming from to fund the facilities, and also what the nature of the facility is. Is it academic, and will any of these facilities be generating revenue? Whether if it's a housing unit, will rent be paid by the student to pay off, obviously, what is necessary to maintain the facility? There are maintenance zones, warehouses, again, if the state didn't necessarily come to the table to fund them, should the state come to the table to maintain them?
That's a fair question. I don't have an answer to it.
It's just an observation.
Yeah.
And Governor Fossey, I don't have it with me today, but we do have additional supplemental information on these projects, and I can be sure to get that to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, taken together, priorities A, B, and C total approximately $321 million. This request provides funding for those items which are critical to our university system. We recognize as a board that we must provide funding for the maintenance, funding for the completion of projects which we've begun, and funding for the renovation of projects that have been done in the past, which is Governor Morton and Governor Fossey pointed out could potentially increase in the future as we take and add buildings that are gifts now, but become liabilities longer term. If there's no more specific questions regarding any of these items.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a motion to approve funding A, B, and C? And then I guess you want a separate motion for the projects that are funded outside of our, with other funds, or is that right?
Actually, there'd be 3, I think, in total. We need 1 for A, B, and C, which would be for the maintenance, completion, and renovations, for a total of 321, and with the slight reduction to the...
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. 321.
321.
321.
Okay. Second, can I have a motion to approve the priority D projects totaling $15.6 million? These are projects that are important to the future of our system as well, and were considered by our committee in October.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. And lastly, there's a request for projects which will not require state capital, which was the presentation that Chris has just made, as described in Attachment 5, but which the universities are seeking legislative authority. Motion?
I'll move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. So moved. Dick, thank you again for serving as the chair of this committee and for taking me under your wing. I'm sure we'll continue to rely, I will for sure rely greatly on your experience and history on many of these issues, and we will address together in the future. Heading into to session, I'm sure that our March meeting will be a very active one, as the chair has instructed me that it most likely will. We have a lot of work to do, and I'm looking forward to continuing the working with you.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, can I just make a comment on this? First of all, I want to thank Dick Beard, for all your hard work as a chair. And just for the record, that this committee has looked at all these projects. You have repeated meetings. You got together. You discussed it. You looked at it. And so the $321 million is maintenance, completion, and renovation. There is not a dollar in this 321 for any brand new ideas or new construction or new building. Am I correct?
Correct.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, Manoj.
Are you adjourning? Your meeting is adjourned?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Forgive me for lack of protocol. I will get better.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
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 All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. This concludes the facilities presentation.